On August 11th, 2014, we found ourselves passing through a small northern village named Pelly Crossing. Having already spent weeks traveling across Canada to British Columbia's west coast, we were on our way north through the Yukon territory to Dawson City, home of the legendary Klondike Gold Rush. To fully appreciate this tale, you must keep in mind that Canada's far north is very sparsely populated. One can easily drive for hours or even days without any signs of civilization. So when you do happen upon a small town, the first priority is always a fill-up at the local gas station. It was there, at the Totem Oil Selkirk Centre, that we first met up with Danny, a First Nations man whose inspirational story I would like to share with you today. It was around 11 a.m. when we pulled up to the small log building and parked our van next to one of the two available gas pumps. The sun was shining brightly, but the northern air was cool and crisp as I stepped out to fill the tank. But before I had a chance to reach for the nozzle, an Aboriginal man in his late 40s approached me wearing a small backpack and a worn-out leather jacket. He introduced himself as Danny, and he reached out to shake my hand. After brief introductions, he explained that he was on his way home for dry fish season in a remote Gwich'in village named Sigachik, and he would be eternally grateful if we could give him a lift as far as Dawson City, some 4 hours north. When I was a child, my father often regaled me with tales of his youthful hitchhiking adventures, and on one occasion I even recall him picking up one of his kindred spirits while we were traveling the back roads near my hometown. So I've always had a bit of a soft spot for people who travel in such a manner, and in many ways was delighted at the opportunity to help Danny on his way. However, this was also my honeymoon, and I knew that Paula, not being quite as exposed to this mode of transportation, would probably feel a little less secure having a stranger in our home while traveling through such an isolated part of the country. So I told him that I'd have to check with my wife, but assuming she was comfortable with it, then we would be able to take him at least partway to Dawson City, as we would be stopping regularly to take photos and explore the countryside. I figured that would give us an out if our collective comfort levels decreased substantially along the way. I filled our tank and then quickly talked it over with Paula, while Danny waited on a bench next to the entrance to the small convenience store that adjoined the gas station. Paula was understandably nervous, but also willing to help as long as I didn't get any strange vibes during our brief interaction. I assured her that I hadn't, and after paying for our gas, the three of us were on our way. Now, our van only has 2 legal seats, but those sorts of technicalities aren't of much concern in the far north. So Danny joined me up front, and Paula sat on one of our small camping chairs that she assembled in the hallway behind us. Within minutes, we were enthralled in a deep and effortless conversation. It was immediately apparent that Danny had lived an interesting life and was skilled at making new friends. He spoke passionately about his childhood living in the wilderness many kilometers from town. And when you keep in mind that by town, he was referring to an unimaginably isolated community, which even now only has a population of 143 people, you'll understand when I say that his traditional upbringing was about as foreign to us as anything we could imagine. His family had survived throughout even the harshest of seasons by hunting and fishing and trading with other families whenever possible. Danny spoke at great length about this part of his life, but his eyes really lit up whenever he came to the topic of dry fish. Dry fish is a traditional form of food preservation, often using salt and wood smoke to prepare fresh-caught fish for future consumption. Many cultures from around the world have been making local variations of dry fish for hundreds of years. But now, with modern food items being more readily available, dry fish has become something of a delicacy. And according to Danny, a skilled fisherman could make a substantial income solely from its production during the autumn months alone. At some point during his later youth, and for reasons I can't recall him explaining, Danny and his family moved into the community of Sigachik, where life was much more modern, though still incredibly rustic by our standards. This is where, in our opinion, Danny's story becomes truly inspirational. He recalled that while relaxing in his living room one afternoon with a friend, they were watching a television program which happened to be featuring a number of bars and nightclubs from around the country. While mesmerized by images of the famous Cowboys Dance Hall in Calgary, Alberta, he turned to his friend and said, "I've decided. I'm going there. I'm going to have a drink at Cowboys Dance Hall." "You're crazy," his friend laughed. You're just some kid from Sigachik. You've never even been to a city before. How the heck are you going to make it all the way to Calgary? I don't know yet, but I'm doing it. Once fully committed, Danny informed the rest of his friends and family about his intentions, and he received similarly doubtful reactions. You must remember that these were modest people with humble goals. Danny said that people from Sigachik just didn't go off exploring cities and having urban adventures. But here's what's so incredible about Danny. Because the harder they laughed, the harder he worked. It wasn't about to let everyone else rein in his dreams. There was a huge country out there, and he was now determined more than ever to see it. So after earning and saving as much money as his circumstances would allow, one day he packed a bag, stuck out his thumb, and headed south. Once lucky enough to hitch his first few rides, he made the several-day drive to Whitehorse with little difficulty. From there, he crossed the border into northern British Columbia. He followed the mountains through small towns and remote work camps, and eventually, he made it east, across the Rockies, and into Calgary. It was a lot of hard work and many days traveling, but he, just some kid from Sigachik, had made it to Cowboys Dance Hall in Calgary, Alberta. And in doing so, he proved it was possible to everyone else he knew back home. But more importantly, he proved it to himself as well. So, he kept on going. He hitchhiked his way across the vast wheat fields of the Canadian prairies, and eventually reached the boreal forest of northern Ontario, the inland sea of Lake Superior, and finally, the urban jungle of Toronto. A place whose lights and sounds would have been unimaginable to him only a few weeks and months earlier. From there, he traveled north to Montreal, Quebec, where he rode the subway for the first time in his life. He said he had never seen so many people in one place before. It was claustrophobic and exhilarating. As the summer came to an end, and after a brief trip to Ottawa, the nation's capital, he was on his way back home for autumn, or as he called it, dry fish season. Once he returned, he excitedly shared all that he had seen and all that he had experienced. Everyone was impressed by his stories, but they still thought he was crazy, and they still didn't understand whatever drove him to venture off in such a way. He was just different. But Danny wasn't deterred. He embraced his uniqueness and got back to work. After all, he needed to earn some more money so that he could get back out on the road. Since that first adventure, Danny took many more trips throughout Canada. He visited Yellowknife in the Northwest Territories, Iqaluit in Nunavut. He took odd jobs along the way to keep him going, and even briefly enrolled in university while in Victoria, BC. He made friends everywhere he went, and he proudly exclaimed that he had couches to sleep on from coast to coast. But he always made it home every fall for dry fish season. When we met up with Danny in Pelly Crossing, he was on his way home from Edmonton. His sister was planning to meet him in Dawson City to drive him the final 600 kilometers across the Arctic Circle. He said he wasn't 100% sure if she was going to be able to make it, but he felt confident in his ability to hitch a ride if needed. And by that point, so were we. The three of us made the 4 hours to Dawson in what seemed like only about 30 minutes. Paula made him some sandwiches, we wished him luck, and we said our goodbyes. After finding a place to camp for the night and spending the afternoon fruitlessly panning for gold, we met up with him once again at the downtown hotel, home of the Sour Toe Cocktail, but that's a whole other story. Danny was playing pool with a number of new friends, his cheeks rosy from the free drinks, and having a fantastic time. We hung out with them for a short while before parting once again, because we were on our way to Diamond Tooth Gertie's gambling hall for the nightly cabaret show. The next morning, we were back on the road, and we never saw Danny again. A couple months ago, I decided I would try and contact Danny to see how he'd been doing in the year and a half since we had crossed paths. After digging around for a little while on the internet, I came across a news report from the CBC. It stated that a capsized canoe had been found on the shore of the Mackenzie River, only a few kilometers from Sigachik. According to locals, 2 men had set off with the intention of fishing for the entire month of September. Numerous RCMP and civilian search parties covered a radius of 130 kilometers, but came up with nothing. As of the latest article I could find, both men were presumed dead. One of them was Danny, and it was dry fish season. During our brief time together, Danny taught us the importance of living your own life, going after your own dreams, and not letting anyone else's doubts hold you back. But he also taught us to remember your roots and always have some place to go home to at the end of each of your adventures. He may have only been in our van for a short while, but he's been in our lives ever since. We met him early on in our adventure, but his friendly, free-spirited, and trusting nature have been imprinted in our memories. And as one final lesson, Danny reminded us that life is short. So don't waste a year and a half before trying to contact someone that you think about often, because you never know when you might be too late.